The fourth picture is this one, Madeleine on the tennis court, the so-called tennis balls photo, which Kate McCann writes about at some length in her book. This picture is curious in several respects. I personally cannot be sure that this is a genuine photo. To illustrate what might be wrong with this photo, I am going to play a 50-second clip about it, made by Madeleine McCann campaigner Lizzie Taylor and now on YouTube, called Discrepancies, Madeleine's Mini Tennis. What is brought out in this clip is that two different people claim to have taken the photograph. As the video progresses, an even more startling discrepancy emerges. Kate McCann insists she took the tennis balls photo on the Tuesday at the children's mini tennis session. But the McCann's friend, Rachel Oldfield, says the photograph was taken while Madeleine was playing tennis on the Thursday of that week, the very day she was reported missing. This is what Rachel Oldfield says in her statement. The 3rd of May was different to the others because, well, it was warmer weather-wise. We went to the Millennium for breakfast as usual. We did that every day. Jerry and Kate didn't. It was just too far for them to go with the twins. So they didn't ever go for breakfast up there, I think apart from the first morning. Matt and I had a tennis lesson at 11 o'clock. I just sat by the pool and read my book. Kate was there and we sat together and chatted a bit. Then I think it must have been about 10:30, Madeleine and Ella and their sort of group came to have a tennis lesson as part of their creche activities. And Kate didn't have her camera, and Jane was there then as well, and Jane took some photos of both Madeleine and Ella. That's one, the poster of Madeleine with the tennis balls. So Kate says she ran back and took the picture. Rachel says Jane took the tennis balls picture. But remember also the claim by Rachel that Madeleine was having a tennis lesson that morning, because as we shall see later on, Madeleine's creche nanny, Catriona Baker, tells an entirely different story about what Madeleine was doing that morning. These are not the only two issues about this photograph. First, where is everybody else? There is no one else in shot. Second, if 3-year-old children were supposed to be playing mini tennis at this time, why do we see proper tennis balls being carried and not these soft balls that might be used for such young children? Third, where are all the loose balls supposedly being collected? Fourth, Kate McCann describes the photo in her book in what seems unnecessary detail. For example, that Madeleine was keen to try on her new shoes and how gorgeous she looked in her t-shirt and shorts. She also states that when Madeleine was playing tennis, she didn't have her camera with her. She says she was so overwhelmed at how gorgeous Madeleine looked that she ran back to her apartment, collected her camera and rushed back to take this picture. It's a strange story because the time she had allegedly rushed back to collect her camera and returned, several minutes would have elapsed and the moment would have been lost. We don't have any more tennis ball photos, just this one. Did she only take that one? It's curious that we appear to have no other photographs of Madeleine after the ones taken on, I believe, Saturday, apart from this one, and the so-called last photo, which I'll come on to in just a moment. But fifth, there are some indications that this photo might have been photoshopped. I suggest that the body of the girl looks like that of a child older than 3. She appears to have a very red right arm, possibly with some scratch marks, which are unexplained. It is certainly Madeleine's head, but has that possibly been photoshopped onto the photo of another girl altogether? Some have suggested that the head looks slightly too far to the right of where it should be. Also, if we look at the last photo for a moment, we see that Madeleine has a very pale skin. Can this really be the same body that we see in the tennis balls photo, where she looks not only tanned but quite red in places? Then we have a question mark about the girl's shoes. She is not wearing the shoes that we saw her wearing in the photos from the playground. She is wearing white sandals. Kate McCann in her book unnecessarily describes what she says Madeleine was wearing. She looked so gorgeous in her little t-shirt and shorts, pink hat, ankle socks and new holiday sandals. Is she trying too hard to convince us that the tennis balls photo really is Madeleine? I don't know if it's been photoshopped, but what I can say is that I'm not prepared to accept this photo is what it purports to be. If two different people are supposed to have taken it, and it's supposed to have been taken on 2 different days. So we cannot use this photo as proof that Madeleine was alive either on the Thursday or the Tuesday. None of the 4 photos we've looked at prove that she was alive after the first day of the holiday. So now I come to the puzzle surrounding this so-called last photo. Jerry McCann, Amelie and Madeleine sitting by the poolside, said to have been taken at 2:29 p.m. precisely on Thursday the 3rd of May. It has been reproduced hundreds of times on TV and in the newspapers. An image just of Madeleine cropped from that photo has been displayed even more often. There's nothing else of Madeleine that week. Just the 3 photos taken on the first day. Then there is the strange tennis balls photo which we looked at just now, and now the 5th one, this so-called last photo. Only 4 or perhaps 5 photos for the whole of that week. That fact alone seems curious. The photo is a charming image of Madeleine. She is clearly seeing the funny side of something, maybe sharing a joke with someone. Her father may look a bit sombre, but Madeleine looks like a carefree young 3-year-old thoroughly enjoying her holiday. The McCanns say the picture was taken by Kate McCann, who had her son Sean, Amelie's twin, beside her as the photo was taken. That seems very probable. The 4 pictures that we can be certain were taken on that holiday certainly show Madeleine having fun running around the playground. But where are all the other photographs? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. No photos except for the controversial tennis balls photo and the last photo. Do any more exist? It seems inexplicable, but I think there is an explanation. Let's see what it might be. First question, was this last photo of Madeleine released straight away by the McCanns? No, it wasn't. It didn't see the light of day for a further 3 weeks. Let's look at this issue very closely. When the alarm was raised about Madeleine by the McCanns at about 10 p.m. on Thursday the 3rd of May, clearly this photo was in the McCanns' camera. Not only that, but if we look at the photos taken by the Portuguese police that night, there is a camera, bold as brass, lying on the living room table. Now, if the Portuguese police and the general public wanted to know what Madeleine looked like, as indeed they did, what better photograph could there be than this one, taken only hours, so it is said, before she was reported missing? But, most strangely, the McCanns and fellow members of their Tapas 7 didn't use it when giving out a photograph of Madeleine to the police that night. Why not? So, before I go on to analyse that so-called last photo of Madeleine in more detail, let's examine another very strange affair and look at what actual first photograph they did produce for the police the night they reported Madeleine missing. This is it. And the very first thing we observe about this photo is that it is not from the holiday and appears to be a much younger Madeleine, possibly having been taken a year or even more earlier. Here are some other much earlier photographs of Madeleine for comparison. It is just one of the great puzzles of this case. Why, with a last photo like the one we've just been looking at, did they not use that one, but instead showed this one, which I'll call the first photo, by which I mean the first one to be released. According to the evidence of Jerry McCann, his Tapas 7 friend, Russell O'Brien, and one of the creche nannies, Amy Tierney, produced copies of this photo, which was on an SD memory card. They allegedly used a small printer belonging to Amy Tierney's boyfriend. It seems from their statements that Jerry McCann had with him not only an SD card with photos of his current holiday on it, but he was actually carrying another SD card or USB stick around with him which had much older photographs of Madeleine and the children on it. Or was he? I suppose it is also possible that he had kept his old photographs of Madeleine on his current SD card. Let's start by examining what the creche nanny, Amy Tierney, had to say about all this when she was questioned. Here is her first statement, and I'll read out the relevant paragraphs. She confirms that on the night of the disappearance she was on duty and immediately went to the bedroom to see if the girl was hiding. She saw that the shutter was raised and that the window was partially open. It was then that she began to look in the wardrobe to see if the girl was hiding. The first idea that occurred to her was that the girl could have left by her own means. However, after checking that the window was open and the shutter raised, she asked the parents whether Madeleine's shoes were there, to which they replied that they were. These facts led her to think that Madeleine could have been taken by someone. However, there was a bed against the window which could have enabled the girl to climb up onto it and then up to the window. The witness thinks it would not be possible, as she would not be able to open the shutters, and even if she had done so, she would have fallen outside, as the window was too high for a child of that age to be able to descend without falling. The witness confirms that the girl's father went to the reception to call the police as soon as her disappearance was noticed, and that 20 minutes had passed. The GNR took 30 to 35 minutes to arrive. Amy Tierney was quickly at the McCanns' apartment after the alarm was raised, helped in the search for Madeleine, had time to note the arrangement of the children's bedroom, and then her statement tells us how Jerry McCann went to the main Ocean Club reception area to report Madeleine missing. But tellingly, in that very first statement of hers, there is no mention whatsoever of her role that night in producing photos of Madeleine for the police. It was not until nearly a year later, 17th of April 2008, that she made a further statement when she told the Leicestershire Police this, as part of a series of so-called rogatory interviews conducted by the British police on behalf of the Portuguese police. When questioned and shown the photographs referred to in the previous statements depicting the English girl on Kodak Extra Life paper, 10 cm by 15 cm, she stated they were printed on her printer, also a Kodak brand. One of the friends of the McCann couple, Russell, asked for a USB memory stick reader in order to print photographs of Madeleine. Immediately the deponent replied that she did not have a USB reader, but that she had a printer with this hardware which could read from memory sticks. She went to her room and returned to the tapas with the printer, where she printed out 20 to 30 photographs of the girl using her own paper in 10 by 15 format mentioned previously. The memory stick containing the photos belonged to the McCann couple and came from their camera. She thinks that all of this took place at about midnight on the 3rd of May 2007. She presumes that she handed all of the photos to Russell, who distributed them to those present. The rest would be for the police authorities. As regards her printer, she says that it is no longer in her possession and it is now with her boyfriend in France. She says, after consultation and in accordance with her previous statements, that it was a Kodak model EasyShare G60 of thermal ink transfer with continuous tonality. So, examining that statement, we learn the following. 1. The McCann's friend Russell O'Brien at about midnight went to the Ocean Club reception when Amy Tierney was at her desk in the tapas bar. She was a nanny. What work exactly was she doing at a desk at midnight? She says he asked her for a USB memory stick reader so he could print photographs of Madeleine. That means that he, or someone in his group, had a printer available or access to a printer. But why not simply hand the USB stick to the police? Amy Tierney says she hasn't got a memory stick reader, but she can print them on her own printer. She describes this as a Kodak model EasyShare G60. So she says clearly that this was her own printer, not someone else's. 4. The memory stick, or the photos on it, was from the McCanns camera, not that of Russell O'Brien. So there we have it. These pictures were taken from a memory stick belonging to the McCanns. 5. Finally, she now says that actually the printer was not hers, but was her boyfriend's, and that he and the printer are now in France. And that last point means that her story about whether these early photos of Madeleine were actually printed on this printer can't be verified. We also might note that she comes over vague towards the end of her statement. She says that she thinks that all of this took place at about midnight. She says she presumes that she handed all of the photos to Russell O'Brien. Does she not clearly remember these things from the fateful night? And she had had plenty of time to prepare for this re-interview in 2008. She goes on to say that Russell O'Brien distributed the photos to those present, but doesn't tell us who those present actually were. She says the rest of the photos would be for the police, but she makes no mention of the police ever asking for the photos. The use of would be is also a sign of possible deception. A truthful person would simply have said these photos were for the police. All in all, when we look at her statement and at the same time recall that she never mentioned anything about helping to produce these photos when first questioned, we are left with serious doubts about whether she is telling us the truth. Here surely is a deep mystery. The McCanns decide on the need for a photo to help in the search for Madeleine. They have an up-to-date one taken just hours earlier, yet they choose this one. Her hair is cut shorter, both around her forehead and at the sides. But much more important than that, it is of a much younger Madeleine. On the day Madeleine was reported missing, she was just 9 days short of her 4th birthday. Yet if we look through assorted photos of Madeleine, which the McCanns have produced over the years, we can deduce that Madeleine was probably no more than 2.5 to 3 years old when this photo was taken. Why would the parents want people at the Ocean Club and staying in the village to see a photo taken maybe up to 18 months ago, when they had one taken hours ago, and certainly also those 3 playground photos of her earlier in the week? It makes no sense at all. It cries out for a convincing explanation. But let's now return to Amy Tierney's account of the printing of those photos. The camera seen on the table in the McCann's apartment is a Canon PowerShot. Some other photos were taken by their friends, the Paynes, possibly with an Olympus camera. Experts have advised me that you could not use either the Canon camera or the Olympus to print direct from camera the photograph we're calling the first photo. The printer, if the camera itself is docked on the printer, can print from a USB key. However, I am informed that such a small printer as was claimed to have been used would be unlikely to be able to print as many as 30 copies without running out of ink. Moreover, the paper that was used to print those photos does not appear to have been readily available in that area of Portugal at that time. The aspect ratio of this photograph is wrong for the Canon. It seems then that if there ever was a USB key given by Russell O'Brien to Amy Tierney, then it must already have had this first photo on it before they went on holiday. Both Russell O'Brien and Amy Tierney talk about just one photo, just one pose. But Russell O'Brien in his evidence seems to be talking of a different photo of Madeleine, one of her in a bright red dress. But the plot thickens. Both witnesses, Russell O'Brien and Amy Tierney, speak only of one photo, but in fact there were 2 photos. This one, of Madeleine in a red dress, was released a day or 2 later, and when Russell O'Brien is questioned about the first photo a year later, he mixes it up with the red dress photo. Yet a further problem arises when we look at when the first police officers arrive. and at the statement of one of the senior staff, Sylvia Batista. The first police to arrive on the scene were the local GNR. They arrived at about 11:10 p.m. They are handed copies of this out-of-date picture of Madeleine, the so-called first photo, soon after they arrive. The statement of Sylvia Batista makes clear that the photos were handed to the police well before midnight. So it looks, for a start, as though Amy Tierney was probably wrong in claiming that she was approached at midnight and only then went to get her boyfriend's printer and start printing. She says was approached at her desk at midnight. What was she doing behind a desk at midnight has never been explained. According to her evidence, she then has to go to her room, get the printer, return to the tapas bar, and then set up the printer and paper. All of that might take several minutes. We know that the Kodak printer takes some time to print each photo, as much as 90 seconds. If she printed off 30 photos, as is claimed, that alone would take at least 3/4 of an hour. The more we study this, there is an obvious contradiction between Sylvia Batista's evidence that she handed out these 6x4 pictures well before midnight and the claims made by Russell O'Brien and Amy Tierney that they only started trying to get these pictures printed on a small Kodak printer after midnight. Russell O'Brien was questioned extensively about his role in producing these photos of Madeleine in 4 separate sessions at Leicestershire Police Headquarters on the 8th of April 2008, and 2 days later on the 10th. Throughout the questioning, Russell O'Brien refers to just one photo, and as we saw, he described a different photo, the one of Madeleine in a red dress, which was released separately a couple of days after Madeleine was reported missing. Still more puzzling, when he tries to recollect what happened that night, he makes no mention whatsoever of anything about a USB key or even of Amy Tierney, the nanny who supposedly helped him print the photos, instead stating that it was another nanny, Catriona Baker, Madeleine's nanny in the Lobster Group. You would think that since Russell O'Brien signed his own daughter into the very same creche as Madeleine that week, he should be able to tell Amy Tierney from Cat Baker. Throughout his many interviews with the police over those 2 days, he is vague and evasive. He claims he cannot really remember what photo it was, stating that he'd seen so many that week. Yet the village of Praia de Luz and the surrounding areas were plastered with hundreds of posters made from this first photo for weeks, so it's rather strange that he can't remember the right one. Could both Russell O'Brien and Amy Tierney be lying about their claims of printing off these photos after midnight on a Kodak printer? It was one of the questions the Portuguese police became interested in long after the early frantic searches for Madeleine were over. It was on the 17th of April 2008, nearly a full year after Madeleine went missing, that Amy Tierney was questioned by Leicestershire Police. The police report tells us, as regards her printer, she says that it is no longer in her possession, as it is now with her boyfriend in France. And that was the end of that. Her story about her printer having been used that night could simply not be verified. Amy Tierney was interviewed by Leicestershire Police on the 17th of April, just a week after Russell O'Brien was interrogated on the 8th and 10th of April. Contrary to Russell O'Brien's evidence that the nanny he gave the USB stick to was Katrina, she confirms that it was she, Amy Tierney, to whom Russell O'Brien handed her the USB key. But we have one other piece of evidence that this whole story is probably bogus. Contrary to claims that Russell O'Brien was busy supervising the printing of the photographs between midnight and 1 a.m, on his own admission, he was busy at the time in the McCanns' apartment writing out 2 different timelines of the evening's events on the inside cover of Madeleine's activity sticker book and handing them to the second set of Portuguese police officers, the Judicial Police, or the PJ. If, on his own testimony, he was in the McCanns' apartment writing out the timelines for the PJ, how could he have been standing around in the tapas bar waiting for photographs to be printed, one at a time at 90-second intervals? To sum up then, the entire story about Russell O'Brien using Amy Tierney's printer to print off these so-called first photos falls apart. This question must be asked. Was this first photo of Madeleine prepared much earlier, maybe before the events of that evening, maybe even on the previous day? The evidence suggests that the McCanns may have got these first photo prints done elsewhere, and have not told us where and when and how they did this. Perhaps it's yet another deceit in a catalogue of deceptions. Now it's time to take a detailed look at some strange goings-on concerning the cameras of the McCanns and the Paynes, and the whole way these photos, or some of them, were made public. These are the bare facts about the last photo. 1. The photograph was certainly taken that week. 2. It shows Jerry McCann, one of the twins Amelie and Madeleine, sitting by the pool. 3. It is sunny at the moment it was taken. 4. The shadows are very short. The sun is at its highest in Portugal at about 1:35 p.m. that time of year, so it must have been taken around that time of day. 5. Jerry looks lightly tanned in this photo. 6. Yet in photos of him taken at the end of the week, after Madeleine had been reported missing, he looks to be significantly more tanned. 7. Despite many weird and wonderful claims that this photo has been photoshopped, 2 world experts in photography and photoshopping, after extensive forensic analysis, have pronounced this photograph to be a genuine photograph with no photoshopping. The 2 experts were asked by a Madeleine McCann researcher to give their opinions on condition of anonymity. He has shown me their reports. The researcher put to the 2 experts a range of amateur opinions that the photo may have been photoshopped this, that or the other way, including claims that one or other of the 3 individuals in the shot had been photoshopped into the photo to create a composite picture. 8. One expert is a highly respected university professor of photography. The other is the owner of a major digital photography business. One of their main lines of evidence is that all shadows on the photograph are consistent with each other and with the position of the sun at that time, high in the sky in the south. And such 100% consistency of shadows is almost impossible to fake. So just to make it clear that we are talking about a genuine photograph here, not a photoshopped one, here is the professor's opinion. Quote, I have taken an initial look at the image. The artifacts alluded to in the PDF document that you sent are simply JPEG compression artifacts as described here. If you magnify other parts of the image, you will see similar artifacts. I also performed a forensic analysis to determine if the lighting and the shadows on the people and background are consistent. They are. I see no other anomalies in the photo. So, at first glance, I see no evidence of photo tampering. But then the professor adds something very important. I will add that it is fairly easy to change dates on an image's metadata or for these dates to be wrong. The owner of the major digital photography business held the same view. From what I saw, I couldn't see anything that would lead me to believe beyond reasonable doubt it had been doctored. The fringing mentioned can be caused by auto-sharpening used in consumer digital cameras to make better or sharper images. These artifacts can often be made worse from image compression algorithms out of Photoshop or other image manipulation software. According to the McCanns, the photo was taken at 2:29 p.m. on the 3rd of May, hours before Madeleine was reported missing. But could the date or time it was taken have been changed? The last photo made its first appearance in a coordinated set of releases to the press on Thursday the 24th of May, exactly 3 weeks after Madeleine's reported disappearance. I'm now going to explore what might have been happening to that photo, or rather the memory card on which it was located during those 3 weeks. After that, I will show you a raft of evidence that suggests this so-called last photo was actually taken on Sunday the 29th of April, the second day of the McCanns' holiday, 4 days before the McCanns say it was taken. One of the most extraordinary aspects of the early part of the investigation into Madeleine's disappearance is that the Portuguese police never had access to the cameras of the McCanns and their Tapas 7 friends. With the benefit of hindsight, this was a significant error, but I suggest that we can excuse the Portuguese police for that. since they were organising a massive search and being hounded by the frenzied international mainstream media in what they were led to believe by the McCanns was a hunt for an abducted child. Some journalists, especially British ones, were, in that very first week, vocalising bogus concerns that the Portuguese police were not pursuing the search for Madeleine vigorously enough. In fact, they drafted in hundreds of police officers to comb the area, and local villagers spent days searching high and low for Madeleine. We now know from several sources that the McCanns and their advisers searched through their cameras and those of some of their friends, ending up by producing 2 CDs of photographs for police use. They did not hand their actual cameras or memory cards to the Portuguese police. It seems the police were too preoccupied searching for Madeleine, so there is no way of knowing for certain whether these CDs handed to the Portuguese police on Wednesday the 9th of May, or possibly the day before, were a true record of all of the images taken on that holiday by the McCanns and their friends. However, evidence suggests that the McCann team only gave carefully selected compilations of photographs to the police. I will suggest, as we examine the evidence, that it is probable that many photographs that could have been incriminating in one way or another were deleted before these CDs were given to the police. Who compiled the CDs of photographs handed to the Portuguese police? We know now that at least 2 people helped the McCanns extract images from their camera or memory cards to prepare them to be given to either the media or on CD to the police. One was a relative of Kate McCann, Michael Wright, from Skipton, Yorkshire. Still more significant, the other person helping the McCanns was the powerful figure of Alex Woolfall, who was described in the press as Mark Warner's expert in crisis management. But he was much more than that. He was actually the head of issues and crisis management for the entire Bell Pottinger Group, the firm headed by public relations magnate Lord Bell, Lady Thatcher's former PR guru. Alex Woolfall's expertise appears to be more about rescuing the reputations of companies and individuals who are in a tight spot than in helping the search for an abducted child. His main expertise, like that of the McCann's chief PR spokesman, Clarence Mitchell, was in manipulating the media. Bell Pottinger is a company who seems to be prepared to represent anyone if the money is right. Lord Bell told author Owen Jones that the McCanns had paid his company £500,000 to keep Madeleine on the front pages of British newspapers for a year. Lord Bell was quoted as saying, "I'm not really interested in what the McCanns think. They paid me £500,000 in fees to keep them on the front page of every newspaper for 1 year, which we did." Now the first question we might ask is, why was it necessary for 2 people, let alone 1, to help the McCanns prepare images for the police and the media, when the focus, after all, was on finding Madeleine? If the police really wanted photographs, why not just hand over their memory cards to the police? There is a Portuguese police statement dated Wednesday the 9th of May, 6 days after Madeleine was reported missing, confirming that Jerry McCann had handed in to the Portuguese police at Portimao 2 CDs of photographs, one produced by him and one by his Yorkshire in-law, Michael Wright. Yet, on the very same day, a junior Hampshire police officer, Detective Constable Stuart William Martin, was examining 2 camera memory cards from an Olympus C50 camera, apparently containing valuable photographs from that week at Praia de Luz. A great mystery surrounds these 2 memory cards, which so far I've not been able to get to the bottom of. In fact, the police that day received these 2 memory cards and some video footage. These 3 exhibits were all labelled NALF, which are the initials of Hampshire resident Nigel Foster, who was on holiday with the McCanns that week in Praia de Luz. Nigel Foster is mentioned, though not by name, in Kate McCann's book, Madeleine. Let's have a look at what she says about him. This incident is said to have taken place on the same day Madeleine was reported missing. After my tennis lesson, I hung around the grassy play area, watching Jerry on the court and chatting to Russell O'Brien, who I'd found there. Another guest appeared with a video camera to record his 3-year-old daughter playing mini-tennis. He looked a little embarrassed and laughingly remarked to us that filming in this way made him feel like a dirty old man. It led to a conversation between the three of us about paedophiles. I remember Russell talking about how everything had got a bit out of hand, that these days people were so untrusting you hardly dared speak to children you didn't know. What he was effectively saying was that the world had become paranoid, that he wanted his daughters to grow up with confidence and a sense of freedom. The other dad, Nigel Foster, and I chipped in with our views. I mentioned not being allowed to take photographs of your own kids in swimming pools any longer, and we agreed that it was a shame things had come to this. It was just 5 days after this, Tuesday the 8th of May, that Nigel Foster took it upon himself to contact Leicestershire Police and offer his photographs from the holiday to the police. Things moved on rapidly. He was told to contact Hampshire Police. He did so, handing in not only his video footage from Pride of Luz, but also, apparently, 2 memory cards from an Olympus camera. From there, the police delivered these items to DC Martin's house that evening, and the following day DC Martin had these taken into his place of work, which was the Hampshire Police High-Tech Unit at Netley, Hampshire, one of the foremost high-tech units in the country. Here is his statement. Videotape from Sony Handycam video camera, 64 MB memory card from Olympus C50 camera, 32 MB memory card from Olympus C50 camera. The package contained an Olympus C50 camera and a memory card holder which contained 1 card in the camera and 1 card in the memory card holder. I imaged NALF-2 using guidance software, computer forensic software called McCanns version 5. I imaged NALF-3 using guidance software, computer forensic software called McCanns version 5. I located 43 pictures in the live area of the 2 cards. Using my forensic software, I was able to locate 73 picture files in the unallocated clusters which had been deleted and were no longer accessible to the camera user. I produced a report. I produced a compact disc SWM301944 containing the pictures and a report SWM3019-45. I have also copied the pictures and the folders they appear on the cards to the disc. On the face of it, the Olympus camera and the 2 memory cards would appear to belong to Nigel Foster, along with the video footage. To give it its full description, it was an Olympus Camedia C50 5 megapixel digital camera, W/3x optical zoom electronics. One reviewer pointed out one of its distinct advantages, writing, "On the positive side, pictures are fantastic. I take this camera with me everywhere and barely have to make any adjustments for my picture taking. Also, the camera allows you to rotate the pictures and crop within the camera itself. It's great to have that capability before downloading to your computer, such a time saver." But a great deal of speculation surrounds this camera and the 2 memory cards. For example, this black and white photograph shows the majority of the Tapas 7 group of friends enjoying tea time together at the Paraiso Beach restaurant in Pride of Luz between 5:30 p.m. and 6 p.m. on the day Madeleine was reported missing. A Madeleine McCann researcher has been able to identify 5 of them. The person most likely to have taken this photo is Fiona Payne, husband of Dr. David Payne, who is known to be a keen photographer and is not in the shot. The photograph closely matches an image captured on CCTV by the restaurant owner at exactly 10 minutes to 6 that afternoon. Photographs like this one could be very valuable from an evidential point of view. So what other photographs were taken on that camera that day or that week? As I'll show in a moment, we don't know what has become of all the other photos that were no doubt taken by Fiona and David Payne and by the other members of the Tapas 7 that week. So, why were the 2 sets of photographs being analysed by 2 separate police forces? Let me look in a bit more detail at what happened to the video footage on Nigel Foster's camera. On Tuesday the 8th of May, and remember, this was only the 5th day after Madeleine had been reported missing, Leicestershire Police, as this report shows, sent this email to their opposite number in Portugal. "Would you kindly permit an officer to visit Mrs. Foster? She has recently been on holiday to the Mark Warner complex and is in possession of video footage taken by her husband. It is understood that the footage is currently contained on their home computer. The allocated officer will need to review the footage, and all footage of the complex should be downloaded onto a suitable storage disk. Mr. Foster has indicated it probably only consists of a 30-second pan of the playground area / pool area / tapas bar. Mr. and Mrs. Foster are not technically competent to download the data. Please statement accordingly re exhibit continuity. I have spoken to Mr. Foster this morning, and he has been advised that local officers will make contact with his wife. If possible, please send a copy to me for initial viewing in the incident room. We see here that all that is mentioned is video footage lasting about 30 seconds. There is no mention, however, of a memory card, no mention of a second memory card, and certainly no mention of a camera. So that still leaves the basic question unanswered. Who did these 3 items belong to? We find that on these 2 memory cards there were also 73 deleted photographs. Now, there is nothing remarkable in that. We all delete some of our digital photographs from time to time. But what is strange is DC Martin does not mention having tried to retrieve any of these deleted images. You would have thought that in a case as important as this, a young missing child, that he would say something about recovering those images. These 2 memory cards were, after all, being examined at the Hampshire Police High-Tech Unit in Netley. DC Martin says that he placed all the images on a disk. It appears he forwarded this disk to Leicestershire Police. One point I want to mention here, and I may develop in a later film, is the precise role of Leicestershire Police in this case. It came up in the Leveson inquiry, where one of the witnesses was Matt Baggott, the Chief Constable of Leicestershire Constabulary at the time Madeleine was reported missing. He was later promoted to run the police service of Northern Ireland. He made this remarkable disclosure to Leveson. On 8th of May 2007, Leicestershire Constabulary was asked to coordinate the UK response to assist the Portuguese inquiry on behalf of the UK Government and Association of Police Chief Officers. The gold strategy set on this date established that it was a Portuguese-led inquiry and that all actions comply with the requirements of Portuguese law, including their Judicial Secrecy Act. Due to the unprecedented media interest in the UK, a coordination group was set up on behalf of law enforcement agencies and government departments to coordinate the media interaction and ensure that a consistent stance was taken. This coordinating group was chaired by the head of corporate communications from Leicestershire Constabulary. That group has continued to meet as required since 2007. Due to the thirst for information from the media, every individual working in Leicestershire supporting the police investigation signed a confidentiality agreement. Messages were also disseminated to all staff to make them aware that even private conversations with friends could be reported on in the media. The confidentiality agreement was something that was put together by the Gold Group, who were running the inquiry as part of the UK effort, not by myself as Chief Constable. Bear in mind that if this Gold Group was established on Tuesday the 8th of May, someone at the highest possible level in the British government must have ordered this at least a day or 2 beforehand. At that time, Madeleine might well have been found, dead or alive, at any time. What possible urgent need was there for such an intense, high-level strategy group? And isn't the excuse of unprecedented media interest rather a feeble one for setting up this high-powered group? A similar excuse, the thirst for information from the media, was also used to gag anyone connected with the inquiry who had to sign an unprecedented confidentiality agreement warning them that any breach of confidentiality would result in being prosecuted under the Official Secrets Act. One Madeleine McCann researcher put in an FOI request simply asking which agencies were represented on this high-level gold strategy group. The reply in October 2014 came back. Leicestershire Police can neither confirm nor deny that it holds the information you requested, as the duty in Section 11A of the Act does not apply by virtue of the following exemptions: international relations, investigations, law enforcement. Section 27 recognises that the effective conduct of international relations depends on maintaining trust and confidence between governments. If the United Kingdom does not maintain this trust and confidence, its ability to protect and promote UK interests through international relations will be hampered, which will not be in the public interest. So, unable to even confirm or deny whether they even had information about which agencies were represented on that all-important strategy group, I would take an educated guess that government security agencies were well represented on that group. But to return to the matter of what happened to the disc of photographs that D.C. Martin compiled. In the Portuguese police files, we find this short report from Inspector Ricardo Paiva. I can confirm that photographs from a CD provided by Leicestershire Police were visualised and analysed. These referred to photographs taken by the Foster's family during their holiday at the Ocean Club between the 28th of April and the 5th of May 2007. Upon analysing these photos, the result was that there was at least one photograph where some of the individuals making up the group of friends of the McCanns couple were visualised, nothing relevant being found for the investigation. So, after the effort of examining 2 memory cards, whosoever they really belonged to, and a short video clip of 30 seconds, all that they had was one photo with some of the Tapper 7 on it. But perhaps what is of more interest is what was happening to some other photographs down in Portugal. On the very same day that D.C. Martin was downloading digital photographs from 2 memory cards from the Olympus, Jerry McCann likewise was handing in 2 computer discs of photographs to the Portuguese police in Portimao. And these images, apparently 113 images and dozens of duplicates, we can see in the Portuguese police files. And they are mostly or all from the holiday. The trouble is, the Portuguese police were not handed any original memory cards. It appears just images scanned into PDF format and then put onto a couple of CDs. Nearly all of the images appear in the files as grainy, poor quality black and white images. Colour photographs taken by the Portuguese police which appear in the police files are reasonably clear, so why do the images provided on a CD by Jerry McCann look like this? A volunteer Portuguese translator known as Album has analysed these black and white images and made these introductory comments on them. He says there are 97 pages of images, mostly black and white silhouettes, many duplicates. Almost all of the black and white images do not readily permit identification of the individual. They were created for the PDF using what is known as black and white scanning and printing. Just 3 of the images were produced in both black and white and in colour, namely the 3 playground photographs that we have already seen. It seems odd that just these 3 pictures have been made available in colour. Why couldn't Jerry McCann have made them all available in colour? But the lack of colour is not the only problem in making use of these photographs. There is no information about which camera or cameras they came from. A Portuguese police officer, Ricardo Paiva, simply states the following. On this date, Tuesday the 9th of May, I state that the photographs contained on the 2 CDs delivered to this police force by Gerald McCann and Michael Wright have been visualised and analysed. Some of them are from the holiday period that the McCann family spent at the Ocean Club in Praia de Luz, beginning on the 28th of April 2007. The visualisation and analysis of these images that was carried out reveals that there are several photographs of interest to the investigation in which it is possible to visualise Madeleine McCann, nor are these photos accompanied by any details of the times they were taken or even the dates, information which certainly might be able to help in their detective work. Were Jerry McCann Michael Wright and Alex Wolfel engaged in a deliberate operation to give the police as little information as possible, whilst at the same time appearing to be as helpful as possible? Elsewhere, Portuguese Police Inspector Hugo Ferreira states this: "I am pleased to inform you that today we were given photographic stills taken during the holiday period in Portugal from the 28th of April by the English families that composed the group that Madeleine Beth McCann was with, so that they can be annexed to the process files." This statement makes the most sense. It is clear that the two CDs taken in by Jerry McCann and Michael Wright were a composite of photographs taken from maybe several cameras. Indeed, when we look through the photographs, we see many photographs obviously taken by the Paynes of themselves and their apartment. Others may have come from the Oldfields, or from Jane Tanner, or Dr. Russell O'Brien, or indeed from the McCanns' camera. There is still some doubt about whether the McCanns' camera was the Canon or the Olympus examined in Hampshire, or both. But as I shall show in a moment, we do know, at least, that the famous last photo was definitely taken on the Canon, shown clearly on the table in the lounge of the McCanns' apartment when the Portuguese police took their first photograph of the scene. One issue that becomes clear as we examine these black and white photos is that some of the photos appear to have been tampered with before being put on the computer disks. Take this one, for example, which is a cropped duplicate of another photo. In other words, someone, presumably either Jerry McCann, Alex Wolfel or Michael Wright, has cropped the photo, taking bits out of it before handing it to the Portuguese police. In addition, there is no black and white version of a cropped playground photograph of Madeleine and Lily together, the one from which we get this picture. This is all that we get in the files, a cropped black and white image side by side with a cropped colour image. So the cropping must have been done on a computer. Something that we saw earlier can be done on the Olympus camera that was handed into the police in Hampshire, apparently by the Fosters. It tends to suggest that those who compiled these images for the Portuguese police just scanned 3 of them in colour, the 3 playground pictures, those being the ones they wanted the police to see, whilst scanning the remainder in black and white because they didn't want the police nor the public to be able to have a clear look at those photos. This tells us one simple thing, that these images did not all come straight out of a camera memory card onto a computer disk. Some of them, at least, have been tampered with or manipulated in one way or another before being given to the Portuguese police. And is it possible Jerry McCann, Alex Wolfel and Michael Wright made sure that any inconvenient and embarrassing photographs were never put on those 2 computer disks in the first place? The Portuguese police received the 2 disks of photographs on the 9th of May. The very next day, both the McCanns were in the police station answering questions. Kate McCann had her camera, presumably the Canon, with her in the actual police station and was looking at the photographs and making notes on them. Were the Portuguese police duped into thinking that they had got all the relevant photographs from that camera on those 2 disks the day before? Michael Wright was aged 44 on the day Madeleine was reported missing. He had married Anne-Marie, a cousin of Dr. Kate McCann. He was military trained and was said at the time to have been a partner in an IT company. Michael Wright and his wife and the McCanns used to meet up from time to time, mostly at family events. Once in 2006 and once in February 2007. Their families were close and they stayed in each other's houses. The first Christmas after Madeleine was reported missing, the 2 families spent Christmas together. At a hearing in the long-running McCann v. Amaral libel trial in September 2013, Michael Wright admitted to extensive monitoring of Madeleine McCann discussion forums on the internet. In the court, he referred to extensive notes he had made in green ink to prepare for giving his evidence. The judge in the hearing saw these notes and asked him about them. He said he had written them up the night before in his hotel room. In a written statement to the Portuguese police, Wright said that he caught the plane from Leeds Bradford Airport to Faro on Saturday the 5th of May, initially staying in an apartment in the same complex as the McCanns. He says he returned 6 days later on Friday the 11th of May for a weekend with my family. It seems that one of his main tasks whilst he was in Portugal for those 6 days was to select and maybe manipulate a series of photos in order to produce a computer disk for the Portuguese police on the 9th of May. Meanwhile, the head of public relations at Bell Pottinger, one of the world's biggest PR companies, Alex Woolfall, was working on another similar or parallel project. He was also helping Jerry McCann with photographs in his camera, as this report in the Times on the 6th of October 2007 informs us. The McCanns had photographs of Madeleine on their digital camera, which Mr. Woolfall began transferring to a laptop computer. I said to Kate, let's try to identify pictures where her face is visible. Downloading the images was a very difficult process for them. It was upsetting. Mr. Woolfall transmitted the photographs to the Press Association in London, from where they were distributed to the media. The portfolio included the now famous image of Madeleine wearing a hat on a tennis court. That's the so-called tennis balls photo, by the way. So that article in the Times made things very clear. PR man Alex Woolfall had access to Jerry McCann's camera and memory card and was transferring the photos onto a laptop computer. And of course, if he was transferring them, he could at the same time have been deleting, amending or cropping some of them. So, exactly when was Alex Woolfall transferring these photographs from the McCann's camera to the computer? He maintained that he flew there on Saturday the 5th of May. But in fact, the flight records show that he travelled there on Friday the 4th of May, the very day after Madeleine was reported missing. Why did he have to be there the very next day? A senior member of one of the world's most prestigious PR companies. Madeleine could even have been found during this flight to Portugal. Why did he rush over there? What was his mission exactly? Why did the top man have to go? Why couldn't one of the more junior staff fly out there? And how exactly could any public relations officer search for Madeleine? The Times article told us he was transmitting photographs to the Press Association, and we now know that one of the first photographs he transmitted on Saturday the 5th of May, according to the data, was the controversial tennis balls photo that we looked at earlier. It seems clear also that Woolfall was behind the sending of this photo to the Press Association on Friday the 4th of May as well. That was certainly quick work if he had only just arrived there that day. And it was this very iconic photograph of Madeleine that appeared on the front cover of Kate McCann's book Madeleine 4 years later. It would mean that Woolfall was not only in Praia de Luz on the day after Madeleine was reported missing, but before the day was out, he had met the McCanns, got their camera, and was already sending images from that camera to the Daily Mirror that day. Madeleine in the red dress, and to the Press Association the next day, the tennis balls photo. But here's a strange fact that was picked up by a sharp-eyed poster on the Complete Mystery of Madeleine McCann forum. No one else seems to have picked it up. Here's a new report that appeared in the magazine PR Week, the public relations rag for the public relations officers. This article appeared on the 9th of May issue of PR Week. The head of risk and crisis management of one of the world's biggest PR firms, Alex Woolfall, had been dispatched to Portugal, so this was clearly a significant news item for the journal. But look at the two lines underlined in red. Mark Warner brought in Resonate on a generic brief a week before 3-year-old Madeleine was kidnapped. Now this is very odd. Resonate is simply a subsidiary of Bell Pottinger. There is no explanation at all of why they were sent the week before. What public relations need did Mark Warner have in Praia de Luz the week before Madeleine and her family were there? None that I am aware of or can even think of. And then at the end of the PR Week report we read this. After Madeleine was kidnapped, Managing Director Michael Froelich referred the firm to his parent company's crisis specialist Alex Woolfall. Froelich and Resonate director Tricia Moon are helping liaise with the British consul in Portugal, the Portuguese police and the Portuguese and UK media. This seems like an astonishing coincidence. Handily available to the powers that be at the very moment Madeleine was allegedly kidnapped were no less than Michael Froelich and Tricia Moon, the managing director and director, respectively, of Resonate, a subsidiary of probably the UK's #1 public relations firm. And already Resonate was liaising with the British consul. It was the British ambassador and consular staff who dramatically and successfully intervened when the Portuguese police, 2 days after Madeleine's reported disappearance, wanted to seize some of the McCanns' clothing. After this intervention, the McCanns washed their clothes, thus preventing the police from subjecting them to forensic analysis. I am going to suggest that there is evidence pointing to Madeleine having died on the Sunday that week. Is it possible that the bosses of Bell Pottinger sent the managing director and director of their subsidiary company Resonate on ahead, as it were, to make some initial inquiries and undertake an early assessment of the situation in advance of their big guns jetting to Praia da Luz on the day after Madeleine was reported missing?